Hey there, folks. Welcome to SGDA 20, Summit 2025's engineering panel. I'm here with our guests. As I'm Anuj, I'm the webmaster for SGDA, and I've just recently graduated from USC with CS Masters. Hence why I'm on this panel. If our guests would like to introduce themselves, feel free.
Hello, I am Diane. I am a software engineer at Sony Interactive Entertainment. I started here about 6 months ago, but I have been in the games industry for about 3.5 years now. This is the second studio I've worked at. Uh, and I've been, I'll get into this a bit more with the questions, but I've been making games for a long time, since around 2016 or so. And it's just something I'm really passionate about. And I've also come to really love programming. So I was really interested in getting into this industry. And I'm really glad I've been able to. And I'm glad to be here today.
Ooh. Howdy, folks. I'm Nathan Loxamana, he, him pronouns. Let's see. Currently a gameplay engineer for Roboto Games. It's an indie studio there, and I've been working there for about a year now. I'm mainly specializing on enemy systems. But yeah, this is one of my first big, like at least main studio role, but also I was working at an educational studio based in Missouri for a little while also working in at university. So yeah, also UCI alumni, so that was cool.
If you guys were UCLA, I would have been like, ugh. But no. Thank you guys so much for coming by and speaking with us. Let's start with our very first question at the beginning. What first made you interested in game development as a career, and what has made you kind of stay and enter the industry? Um, the floor is yours.
Uh, can I go first?
Yeah,
Or
go for it. I know you touched on this a little bit too.
okay, yeah. So I've been playing video games my whole life since I was like 4 or 5 years old, and ever since then, it's always just been a real interest of mine to be able to make my own video games or work on these really popular video games. And, at the time, you're always like, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm never going to learn how to program. That's way too hard. But uh, I kind of along the way got started on it through some very, very humble ways. Like, I think the first games I ever made were in this terrible piece of software called Video Game Tycoon.
Oh,
Um, it was, I bought it at a book fair for like $12, and it was not good, but I made a few things in it. And then around 2010 or so, I started getting into RPG Maker, and I made a bunch of stuff in that. I never finished any of them, but it gave me a lot of experience with like both writing for games and also like not actual programming in the real popular languages, but kind of getting started with building out game logic. And then around 2016, I started getting into Game Maker, and that was the first point where I was like actually starting to learn some programming. And I was like, okay, this is not as hard as I expected it would be. And from that point, I went into college and started learning programming on a more like large scale and getting better and better at it and realizing I really enjoyed it. So by that point, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to stick with this. I'm really interested in this. So from that point on, went through college, got my first job a couple of months after I graduated. I was there for a few years, and now I am at Sony. And sorry, missed one part. I think I would say the reason that I have stayed in the industry is because it's just something really important to me. Games are incredibly important, and I want to see this industry succeed. And even though it's really struggling right now, I want to do whatever I can to help it get through this struggle and become something a lot better.
Oh, 100%. I completely feel that too, but also wonderful, like at least like progression with all this stuff. Let's see. On my end, maybe not as much of a formal progress into games, but I grew up playing the Pokemon card game competitively, and I absolutely love to see how games could connect different people, especially just from different backgrounds and more. And eventually also just exploring more of the online space and just also managing a few Minecraft servers later, I found myself leaning more into wanting to make games and those type of experiences. So in high school, I try to make all my comp sci projects somewhat related to games and just hope for the best. And then when I went over to UCI, I took part in a week-long game jam where I was like, okay, this is where I'm going to finally learn Unity. And like in that week, also I picked up pixel art animation and saw how that progressed. But yeah, overall, I really like to stay in the industry just because of the people it attracts, as well as the cool skills you can develop through it. Like the industry attracts a range of interesting people with different like passions and more, and just it's always interesting to see and pick people's brains on how they think, different ideas they have, and just yeah, I think it's a fun time. I love the community. In terms of skills I can develop, I just love mixed media stuff in general, and as someone who has a lot of ideas, I like the idea of just being able to take something in my head and just create it in some interactable way and just, yeah, being able to develop some of those skills while working is a plus.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I RPG Maker stays just like genuinely really cool. I It's a surprisingly powerful engine. I've toyed with it a little bit and I was like, oh, this can do way more than I thought it could.
Yeah, I want to do more with it at some point.
But see, I think they have like a one that you can make like a Paper Mario-esque now. Paper Maker
Yes,
is
that's by a different company, I think.
oh, okay.
I think it's actually free if you
Yes.
want to check it out.
I wanted to use it for a game jam, and then I think we ended up going with something else. I don't know why, but I was like, this looks cool, and then we went with something else. So, I can't speak to it. This is not sponsored because I don't know how it is. But in
And
I think it's really cool just like starting with the Pokemon TCG. I didn't know that you played competitively. That's really cool. I've like competitive Pokemon has always been something that I'm like, oh, this is way above how I played this game. I just press the
oh
attack.
yeah,
Like
just there's the cool like attacks or like the cool cards, and I just
my
want the art.
I accidentally went to Elite Four with an entire Ubers team without knowing what Ubers was growing up. And I would still lose. I wasn't very good at the game. So
As long as you're having fun, exactly.
yeah, exactly. For our next question, I'd like to ask, what technical skills, we have a lot of students and they're developing their own technical skills. What technical skills would you say are the most in demand right now, as a gameplay, as like an engineer in your experience, and just maybe if you have any experience with like other types of engineering, um, anything that you guys think would be good.
Yeah. At least I can start. I have maybe not the most knowledge on this, but at least you can fill in whatever I don't get. But overall, I feel like it can really differ per company and different project needs, and also as someone who hasn't been in the industry for as long, we'll see. But I do see some universally like useful skills as like online multiplayer and networking systems generally. There's a lot of multiplayer games out there, and at least it's one of those specializations you can get into that is like going to be applicable in different ways, especially if you even if you're not the core multiplayer person, at least you might have to still architect some of your systems to work differently for those type of games. Other things that I think of would be also people who are able to optimize stuff really well, or also like specifically maybe graphics engineers, just because anything to get numbers down there for really good FPS or anything like that can be really useful, especially if you want to port it to different devices and more. And then just a general broad fields that I like to always just gun for. Love technical art. It's a very broad, like, there's a very broad definition for what technical art is, and it can be also very, very drastically different per studio, but it can be the glue for a lot of at least indie projects, and it also at least it can help you like if you have general tech art experience, I think it can help you communicate with other people better, as well as can just like help you fill in some extra needs in projects as it comes up. But yeah.
Yeah, I also have like not too much experience with like answering this question, but I would say that it's generally good to kind of broaden your scope a bit because a lot of times like it's very rare that, well, sometimes it can be a bit rare to find a role that just wants, for example, like one programming language. Like, even if you find like a gameplay programming position that uses C++, plus plus, they might be writing scripts in Lua or JavaScript, for example. So it's good to kind of branch out a bit and teach yourself a bit of those other languages because once you've learned one language, it's pretty easy to learn other ones as well. And you're going to do yourself a big favor by branching out a bit and adding those to your skill set as well. And then I would also say that sometimes it can be the really specialized niche roles that end up being ones that companies look for, like Nathan touched on this, but tech artists I see a lot as a role that studios need, and also like graphics engineers in general. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would suggest like doing a bit of learning on that because you might find that there are opportunities for that that you wouldn't have found otherwise.
Yeah. Slightly building on that too. Sometimes, at least on the associate level, you might be hired as more kind of just a general engineer. At least it depends. And then as you progress more into like mid-level areas, that's where the specialization can play a much bigger role. At least in my experience with the indie side of things, that's how it was at my studio, where I would be actively talking with my manager and like, what sort of niches in engineering do we have covered and what do we need, as well as like what sort of opportunities can I latch onto to hopefully build on those skills. So it can just be situational on like depending on the studio or like group that you're working with too.
Yeah, I can corroborate that because at my last job, which was an associate level position, I was very much a generalist. I was doing like gameplay programming, systems programming, UI programming, a little bit of everything. But now at this position, which is more mid-level, I'm kind of a bit more specialized. So I would say that definitely holds true a lot of the time.
Speaking as somebody who just took a computer graphics course for the first time in my master's program versus my undergrad program, oh my God, it's so important to know, and it helps you understand how things work so much better. And it also makes you really good at programming math,
Hmm.
in my opinion, which is something that you, especially as gameplay engineers, we have to know. You have to know your like linear algebra quite
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, that's something I need to get better at.
It's there's some stuff that I'm like, oh, I can do this, I can with my eyes closed, and then there's other stuff I'm just like, huh? I
I
didn't
have to
know
be
that
like
you could do.
drawing little
Yeah.
diagrams on my like
Yeah,
iPad somewhere and just
I'll
yeah.
see like a matrix and be like, war flashbacks, not again. And similar with tech artists, so just a good tech artist, I feel like genuinely magicians. We worked with tech artists on my capstone, and every time she submitted something, I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing here? What's going on? There was a tube man that she really wanted to animate, like one of those flailing
Yeah.
guys, and she did it in like a weekend because I was like a little bit worried at first. So I was like, can she? Is this? Do we have the time left for this? She does it in a weekend. I'm like, okay, never mind. Why did I question anything?
Yeah, no, it's really cool to be able to see, at least on the tech art side, that it can be a little bit more visual. So at least you get more feedback of the work that you're doing and just like, I can show you this cool thing. But
Exactly.
yeah. I will say also just tacking on a little bit extra to that. Sometimes, at least, just knowing more about your engine of choice, like if you're really into Unreal or really into Unity, knowing some more of those niche tools or like packages can be really helpful, at least. Also going into things like with I work mainly in Unity and also just like there's a lot of like procedural animation tools that we can do to really make some like head IK really fast or like foot snapping stuff. So like things like that can be really useful to learn.
Yeah, at both this job and my last job, I've literally had people tell me, okay, can you research this feature in Unreal because we've never used it and we want to see if it will help us. So you might end up doing that quite a bit, and it can be really revealing if you like work in those engines a lot because you might find out about something that will really benefit both you and your team with that sort of thing.
The best thing that I've learned to do with my degree is get really good at Googling things.
Yes.
Uh,
Absolutely.
really good at just like, how does that, is that a thing I can do? Oh, it is. Oh, it's this powerful. Let me just replace this other thing. Um, it's interesting to hear that that's kind of like something that's required of both bigger and smaller studios too. Of just
Mhm.
it makes sense because new features are always being added, new features are always being old features are getting pushed to their limits. So it's important to know what you can and cannot do, and what you cannot do is often just as important
Oh yeah.
to help communicate with your other team. Which segues us very well into our next question. What skills do you value most in yourself and in other teammates, be it in your discipline or outside of your discipline?
So in this kind of area, I would say most of the things that I value in teammates are more on the soft skills side. Like, probably the biggest one is communication, because depending on how your communication structure is within your team, you can end up saving a lot of time or wasting a lot of time. I I might go into this a bit more later based on what questions we get to, but it's really important to have a good communication model. And, you know, when someone asks a question, you have a model that lets that question get answered really quickly, and you're not having too much back and forth trying to understand what each other means, and you're kind of getting on the same page really quick and getting all the context you need so you can solve problems really quickly. Um, I would say another thing that I immensely value is respect among teammates, and, being willing to listen to suggestions and feedback. Like, you might have built this system all on your own and you're really proud of it and kind of resistant to changing it, but other people on your team might have some feedback on how to improve it and say, oh, we should also optimize this part, or there's a better way of doing this. Let me explain myself. So, whenever that happens, it's extremely valuable if your teammates are open to that sort of feedback. And change is necessary in systems like that because with engineering, you're updating things all the time and trying to improve and optimize things all the time. So people who are open to that change and listening to feedback are really great to work with for me. And lastly, this is a pretty basic one, but just creating a comfortable environment within your team is really important. Like, you don't want a situation where you're just dreading working with these people all the time. You want people who, are creating a safe space for you and anyone else, and just giving you an environment that you're actually, excited to work in rather than one that is kind of a turn off for you, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with all of those points. On my like tiny notes, I had exactly those things as well. I guess the most important one for me is the idea of being able to give and take constructive feedback. Like being able to separate yourself from a feature is really important. So it's like you don't have a lot of friction if you do need to get things changed or actually have things critiqued for the sake of the project. Like at least our company culture is very lighthearted, where like at least you can give and take all of that without any drama, which I really appreciate. But I know at least there are some instances of teams where that isn't necessarily the case. Other things too, just with communication and organization specifically, is like documentation. It's something that people don't always enjoy doing and things like that. I personally love taking notes. So at least like throughout my experience with that studio so far, I've been like uh, doing a lot of notes on like anything I'm making, as well as helping revamp some of the onboarding stuff. So at least whenever we make a new system, at least we have like the most bare bones manuals that you can do. So then you can just like send it off to someone else if they need to quickly debug a different system they haven't worked on or something like that. Also, like at least with different communication channels too, that can be really nice. Like I'm glad that I have my own space to just post a bunch of like systems and videos and random pictures of different enemy systems that I end up making. So then designers know what I added and what they can tune and just like what they can break if they want. I don't know. But yeah, clear communication, really, really important.
I think there's with engineering at least there can be this kind of like outside view of like it's an ivory tower where like you're disconnected from everything. But no, the soft skills are so important. Like you're fundamentally working in a team with other people. I-
Yeah.
If you
Mhm.
treat it like you're just kind of like doing your own thing, disconnected, that's not gonna work because you're not. You're really not doing that.
Yeah, especially if you are making like tools for other
Oh
disciplines
God,
too.
yeah.
That's incredibly important.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely
At,
depends on the structure of the studio and like how big it is. On indie sides of stuff, it's you're gonna be interacting with everyone else a lot more.
yeah, at my last job, uh, the engineering department worked with other departments on a daily basis, and I was building a lot of tools for those departments. So that whole cross-departmental communication and understanding is really important in an environment like that.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's I think one of the things we've been getting from the summit a lot is like the importance of soft skills and just this is they're so important. You really can't like if you don't have the soft skills, it's going to be really hard to find like people who want to work with you. And
Yeah.
this is an
Mhm.
industry where we need to lift each other up very often, especially given the tides.
Mhm.
See, I'd like to ask my next question. I'm going to jump around a little bit and ask, what should somebody do to excel when first starting a new job? Um, focus on, is there anything specific they should focus on? Anything that they should stray away from? What are your thoughts?
Ooh. At least I can go first, maybe.
Mhm.
At least I'd say talk to your producers and managers and don't be afraid to ask questions and reach out for help. At least our studio really emphasized reaching out early rather than struggling on something like just on your own for hours, since a quick question and a nudge in the right direction can be really helpful sometimes, and at least that can
Yes.
show what you need help with. I think other things too is learn about different specializations as well as find opportunities that let you work on things you're interested in if you are like able to do that and have some form of say to your managers. I'm like, hey, if there's a cool like shader task for me to do, it would be nice if that went to me. So things like that. And then finally, another extra note is just have clear work-life boundaries already in terms of just like if you're like after hours and like just turn off notifications for things like Slack or just so you don't have to worry about it, as well as this can vary per work culture too. But just make sure to have time to decompress or separate your like work environment from your actual like living space if you're working at home. But yeah.
Yeah. So I have a few things on this. First thing I'll say is be open to learning new things because that will happen. And in fact, it happened to me at this very job. Um, when I started here, I ended up doing a lot more DevOps related things than I expected, which
Huh.
is not something I had much experience with. So that ended up being a real learning experience because I'm learning all these new tools like Jenkins, for example, and like I didn't expect to be working with this tool, but now that I am, I'm able to learn it. And, I've been given this opportunity and the time to learn it because I'm going to be applying it on a daily basis. So anytime those opportunities come up, don't see it as like, oh no, I don't know this thing that I'm using. See it as an opportunity, like, okay, I'm going to be learning this thing that I didn't know. And that's really great because I can use it both here and in the future. Um, Also, I would say definitely get to know your coworkers. If you have any casual channels or off-topic channels, post in there and make friends with people because you're gonna be working with them and meeting with them. So it's really important to get to know them and kind of establish common ground like, oh, do you like this? I like that too. Share hobbies with each other, things like that. And that really can help the work experience a lot because you're working with someone that you're a lot more familiar with rather than someone who you've just like stumbled into the company and don't know. So be sure to do that. And then the last thing I'll say, I know it's hard, but please try not to fall victim to imposter syndrome when you start at a new place. It's really easy. Like, once you've started somewhere, it's really easy as soon as you make a mistake or you're having trouble with something to be like, why am I here? Why did these people hire me? Uh, I promise you can do it. They hired you for a reason and they know that you can do it. So anytime you encounter difficulties like that, just reach out and ask for help and you'll overcome that and you'll learn to get better at those things. So just keep that in mind.
I definitely like imposter syndrome is such like a tough thing because it's you're fighting your brain mostly.
Yeah.
And some like a lot of sometimes your coworkers won't help, but like a lot of the time it can feel very isolating. Um, but like you said, people want to help each other. You're working together to make this to make this game and just these are team projects. They're not like a group project in class where it's a team project in the sense that one person's doing everything,
Mhm.
but these are very much like these are very much like everybody wants to help each other. People are going to be working together. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm just gonna also just plus one try to meet and get along with, or at least just like learn more about coworkers stuff. Yeah. At least our studio does this thing at the end of our like in our daily stand up, after we say like what we did yesterday, what we did today, we always add a personal thing at the end, or it can be anything like I got a haircut yesterday, or like I have like something cool planned for the weekend. And then every week we have like a question of the week where like it could be what's your favorite bird or something. Just there's different ways to add to being able to make the workplace like I guess more friendly depending on like the studio type, and also especially this isn't more applicable to the indie side of things when you can have like everyone in a little group meeting. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. For our next question, I'd like to ask, how has the industry changed in the last 5 years? In case, like, even if it's something that you were observing while you were in school, it's still very helpful. And what changes do you anticipate will happen in the next 5 to 10 years? So, I mean, host this summit in 5 years. We can look back on this. Oh God, I haven't hosted this for 5 years. Oh,
Oh boy. Let's see. Yeah, this is something I personally don't have a good grasp on yet, but just general things I'm seeing. Well, as we know, the industry right now is a little unstable, and it's also hard to land like just land jobs right now. There's a large ask
I'd say
for
more than a little.
yeah, yeah. Oh boy. Anyway, I think yeah, there's a large ask for senior level positions and not too many entry level stuff, but I do see a lot more, at least indie studios coming up, or specifically individuals making games and connecting that to social media engagement. At least I feel like there's a lot more of that now, especially like with more TikTok things going on and also just people getting more into YouTube. So I feel like that is a route to take if you want to go into like different content creation, social elements for it. But I would hope that the industry stabilizes a lot more. But yeah, Diane, if you want to go for it.
Yeah, yeah, you've pretty much touched on a lot of things. I'm honestly not sure if I can really say where I think it's gonna go in the next 5 to 10 years because I'm just not sure with how things are going. There's a lot of uncertainty, and only time will tell how things are gonna go. Um, I think what I want to say is just like kind of giving advice for people who are interested in the industry at this point. Um, One thing I will say is absolutely go for it. Like look for jobs because that's the only way you're going to find them. But I would also say keep yourself open to other opportunities, like possibly outside of the industry. The good thing is with engineering, like once you know programming, you have a lot of opportunities open to you, not necessarily just the game industry. So I would definitely broaden your horizons and keep those opportunities in mind in addition to the ones in the industry. And other thing I would say is don't give up, just keep at it. You know, I've had experience with being laid off and trying to find a new job, and it's not easy. It never is, but you will get there eventually. So just keep at it, and it'll eventually pay off.
I that makes a lot of sense of just I regarding the first point of like social media engagement, I've noticed a lot more like especially indie studios will
Hmm.
talk about their development process. They'll show off things that are unfinished, like Aggro Crab.
Oh yeah.
Does a lot of like really funny, I think their video where there's like, yeah, we've added animal lambda to the game. I was like, wait, what? You suddenly made me very interested in this game. Um, but even with AAA studios, having like no clip documentaries showing the development process
Mhm.
are pretty common. Just developer deep dives. I play a lot of Warframe, so they do dev streams where they just showcase funny. So they had a dev stream recently that was all just like, "Hey, here's some funny backend stuff that's going on." And I was like, "Are you sure we're gonna be okay? Your call." But like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I want my code to be shown to the stream. And regarding just like applying, yeah, no, it's tough in the industry right now. But if you get another job, you can always still make games. You can go do game jams, make solo. You don't even have to do game jam, make solo projects. Because it's making game like it's a tough time in the industry right now. I was so hoping that I wouldn't have to say that anymore. But it's still true. But if you can make like making games is still something you can do on smaller teams for fun. It's not something even if it's not your job, you can still do it and that builds your portfolio. That makes
Yeah.
you more like it shows that were still into games while you were doing something else that might not be as as just like game focused.
Yeah.
Um, and game jams, I always say like I'm getting too old for game jams, and then I do one. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just 25. I got some time. I got some time in me.
Make all the crazy stuff you want.
Exactly. This game jam is a way that I can make the weird things that there's no way this is going to get funding, but like, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For our next question, I'd like to ask, is there a specific experience that you've had where you wish that you or your team had done something differently? If you were to do it over, what would you change, Diane? I remember you had some, like, I think this might have been the question that you're like, I'll speak more about experiences later. But
Uh, I'm not sure if it was this one,
okay.
but yeah, for this one, I would say the thing I'll mention is um, at my last job, this was kind of like, I would say there's things that I wish I would have done differently and the team would have done differently in this situation. But at my last job, with the game we were working on, we we kind of ended up restarting from a very early point quite a lot. There were a lot of times when we scrapped a bunch of stuff and started over, and it really sucked because a lot of people's work was kind of getting put aside and we were trying new things instead. And I would say eventually we got closer to what we were looking for in terms of the game experience, but there was a lot we had to throw away along the way. So I would say, I think as a team, we should have done a bit more work on the pre-production side, establishing more clear goals for what we wanted to make, because in a lot of ways, what ended up getting restarted a lot was kind of the whole gameplay flow experience. So I think it would have been good for us to do more prototyping and more play testing, especially because we didn't do too much of that. Um, we kind of did a few internal play tests and not much more than that. So doing that more frequently and like with more people, I think would have helped us to better hit that target we were looking for and more early establish the kind of gameplay flow and whole game structure that we wanted. And that would have saved us a lot of trouble of restarting things over and over. And also, for me personally, one thing that I wish I would have done differently was that, going through that whole experience is kind of demoralizing in a lot of ways. And it kind of had a negative effect on my attitude. And I was I was really not enjoying going through that process and I was getting a bit negative about things. So I kind of wish that I was a bit more on the positive side during that because, you know, if you're negative about things, it's gonna propagate and people are gonna be like, hmm, things aren't going great. But if you try to stay positive, you can have a better effect on people because, that can help you better see things that can be improved and, contribute more to that process of iteration and, making things better. So I just wish that I was a bit more uplifting during that whole time.
Mm. Yeah, morale definitely is really important too. But also, yeah, like the prototyping and actually testing things out too. I completely agree. Um, like building on that, I think knowing a large amount of like the requirements for systems is really important too. Like you learn that through a lot of the prototyping process. At least that kind of connects to like an example that I was also thinking of on my end. Well, it's not necessarily something that I well, we ended up redoing it anyways, but one of the systems that I revamped was our enemy behavior system, where it was very like it was very custom for the enemy, but it wasn't really as flexible, wasn't really as easy to use. And then we realized that we wanted to emphasize modding in our game a lot more. So we have an internal modding tool where, like, inside Unity, we have like another Unity to create our game, and we wanted to be able to also like change the enemy behavior both on the design level side of things, but also maybe open it up to players in the future too. So we had to rescale the whole system to be able to work for just a bunch of new enemies in our survival crafting game, but then also have the modularity for it to be used in this tool as well. So I guess knowing the requirements early is really important, and also relying on existing systems versus like rather than having just a completely custom system that's designed for this thing. Sometimes it is good to rely on like behavior trees or existing structures that you know has been tested and can work. So there is that as well.
Awesome. This is really, really good advice. I don't have a lot to add on to this one. I give it a little bit. And
Yeah.
I'll have more to add on. I think we have one more question that was kind of like highlighted. So let's go ahead and ask, what are your thoughts and experiences with uh, crunch and just like how do you maintain a healthy work-life balance? Because I think we talked about this earlier and just it's so important. It can be so easy. This is a passion-driven industry, so putting in those late hours can be kind of like expected from higher management and just like, no, that's how do you work sustainably?
Yeah, so this is actually the one that I was
There
going to
we
come back to.
go.
There we
So,
go.
um, Nathan mentioned this during I think it was during the advice for when you're starting a new job, but
Mhm.
please maintain a good work-life balance and do not do things like working after hours even if you're working on something that you're really passionate about and you're like I love doing this and I want to finish it. Please keep that to work hours and relax and decompress and do other things when work is over because you really don't want to make your whole life about that. I would really suggest like even if you absolutely love your job and you're excited to do it, do your best to have some interests outside of that because you don't want to get burned out. And that is something that's really easy in this industry. So, you know, just do your best to maintain that work life balance. And I would, I'm kind of speaking from experience here because at some of the past places that I've worked, I've seen some horror stories about this of people like choosing to work past midnight on things because we had a deadline coming up, even though like with some kind of adjustments to how we were doing things, we could have finished things within the work time that we had, but people were kind of volunteering to work really late. And that's just something that's kind of demoralizing to see because you can visibly see how it's negatively affecting your coworkers in terms of their health and how they're working. So I just think it's really important to do your best to maintain that balance and, you know, don't try not to think about work outside of work hours, try not to work outside of hours, just maintain that balance. I know I've said that phrase like five times now, but it's just so important and it's something that you should really try to do.
Oh, 100%. Like that balance and being able to just turn your brain off from work is so important to
Yeah.
get. On my end, I've been very lucky to have a studio that is very anti-crunch. Because the general perspective, at least of the managers there, is while you can get like a boost of productivity for some time, the recovery period afterwards is not beneficial, at least in the long run, where you have people just like mentally not doing all right. At least it can slow down some of the different communication channels and more. But at least there's other ways to try to avoid that through at least like communication and good estimations. Like clearly communicating with producers too. If you know that you're like if you're going to spend a little bit more time on a certain feature, like that can really help at least garner a good expectation of when things are going to be finished too. As well as, of course, like it depends on the company culture, depending on how well you can go for that. But yeah, just definitely try to find ways to like separate work life and personal life, but then also try to find maybe non-game dev hobbies to do. At least that can be really helpful. Like, as someone who only did game dev stuff pretty much all university and really like focused in on that, when I started working, I was like, wait a minute. Maybe I shouldn't be working on like two personal projects on the side after work or something. So like I ended up picking up like rock climbing or like reading books or just random board game stuff. Like it can help you, like finding those other things can be nice to take you out of that work mentality.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And uh, talking a little bit more about crunch, I would say that that's something you should really keep an eye on because if crunch is happening, then there is a problem somewhere, and you should really talk to someone about it. Talk to your manager and be like, this is really concerning to see. Is there anything we can do to help prevent this? And thankfully, I have not been in this experience, but if you're being like pressured to work late or pressured to crunch, that's really a red flag. And in that situation, especially, definitely talk to someone about it because that can really lead to some terrible things.
Absolutely. I think I think it's very much like just i- if you're being pressured to crunch, that's like a very much like start running. But it can be
Yeah.
easy in this industry to like kind of
Mhm.
impose self-crunch or just like I need to
Yeah.
put in these late hours to get this feature working. Um,
Yeah, it kind of
and
connects
it's
back to that point of separating yourself from the feature as well. So at least the success of
Yeah.
the feature and when it's done is not necessarily like connected to you and your self-esteem, etc. And that can be really healthy to do.
definitely. I think now we have a few audience questions that we'll ask
Ooh.
before we wrap up. So the first question from Peter is, how do you keep your whole team up to date with version control? Um, I think that is a lot of the time, like we don't really get a lot of experience with version control in school until like our capstone. So how does it work for you in the industry?
Yeah, this very much is dependent on your company because every company and every team within that company is going to have a different strategy for this. And, it's something that the team might have come up with and develop over time. In my case, at this job, we have been working on this because there have been some friction points in our version control strategy, and we've been brainstorming ways to improve that. Um, I guess to go a little bit into detail on it, the way that we personally handle things currently is um, we have a couple of merge policies. The main one in terms of like keeping up to date is every Monday we do something called Merge Monday, where you merge the main development branch into whatever feature branches you are working on and fix any conflicts that need to be fixed, and that helps ensure that you're constantly up to date and you're not surprised by those conflicts happening when you try to merge your PR into main or development, for example. And another thing to mention is we currently have some people on the team who are working as release managers, and they're it's mostly people in like production or manager positions, and they're just working with each sub team in the department to make sure that everyone's branches are getting updated each week. And anytime that we merge development into main or merge a feature branch into development, that we're taking care of any conflicts and we're making sure that there are no issues before, like, we always build those branches before we merge them just to make sure we're not introducing any new problems. And yeah, it's still a system that we're working on, but I think we've gotten it to a pretty decent place right now.
Really nice. Yeah, no, it definitely depends per studio and the work culture and whatever things people have come up with since also I'd imagine it'd be completely different too for like if you're on the indie side versus AAA or however you want to do it depending on how much you don't want to break things. At least like on my studio, I feel like while we do branch off for like private alphas or different demo builds, etc. We're mainly just iterating on like one main branch, and if it breaks, we have like a bot set up to ping us in Slack or to ping the person who broke the build in Slack, and then you can just push a fix and see what happens. But most of the time, for that quick iteration, we don't have to worry about it as much. But like we also have someone who is the release manager when we do cut off for those release branches. And it's supposed to cycle between the engineers, but recently it's been only one of the engineers since he just keeps signing up for it. We're like, okay, sure. But at least we have a manual in terms of how to be the build master if needed. But yeah, definitely depends per studio.
I might have to see that Merge Monday idea. That sounds not awesome, but helpful.
Yeah, it's really good, I think.
We have another question from Megna. She asks, how do you get into programming as somebody who isn't really into programming? As example, she's a artist.
I feel like the biggest part is there's a lot of underlying or a lot of commonalities between a lot of different programming languages. Like I know a lot of people start learning, at least in university, like Python because
Mhm.
it is like less structured than things like C++, C Sharp, etc. So I'd say maybe checking out one of those classes can be good, but then also just for some of the basics, some people just play around with things like Scratch, etc., just to wrap your head around it. Um, I think especially like on the artist side, you could do the transition of like slowly going into technical art where it's like art adjacent stuff. So you can still apply some of the art related knowledge that you have into the like systems that you're working with. Since like cool, you know a bunch of lighting stuff. Maybe you can apply some math to be able to recreate things or different tools for that. Um, but I would say starting off with some of the fundamentals can be really nice, and then maybe pairing up for just smaller projects to try things out. Since I think overall, just like pushing yourself to do small scale like game jams and stuff can be really good for trying out new roles.
Yeah, I would also say that uh, learning a bit about one of those beginner-friendly languages can be a good starting point. But I would also say a great way to start learning programming is to just start learning a game engine and playing around in that engine. Like I briefly mentioned, I kind of first started with programming by learning Game Maker because, the Game Maker programming language it's kind of like JavaScript, but it's a bit simplified in a lot of ways. And it's both very easy to learn and also teaches you a lot about how other programming languages work and is a great jumping off point if you want to learn any of those. So I would say, starting with an engine like Game Maker or Unity or Godot and just like watching some tutorials and learning the basics and jumping off from that and building some really simple things in that engine, applying what you've learned, through that whole process, you'll both be getting experience with game dev as a whole, like doing all the things required for those. And in that process, you'll be learning programming because you'll be the one programming all the things for those games. So I think that's a really great process to start with if you're interested.
Yeah. Building a little bit on that idea of like starting with a actual engine. I know like Unity has a lot of demo projects that you can do the step by step with. And I think having a clear idea of generally what you want to create feature wise can be a really good way to go about it. Since I know like sometimes I want to get into programming, but then you don't know if you start at a very general level, it might be hard to start like what do you want to investigate? If you want to have like a gun shoot, like it could be easier to research code for that rather than just kind of doing whatever you want. So having a clear focus on what you're looking into can be at least a lot less intimidating. There you go.
Yeah.
It's one of those things also like a lot of game engines have some really good tutorials of just like how do you program in this? How do you use the components? What does serialized field mean in Unity? Um, and it's just really and Unity has like high level shaded language too, so you can use that. Um, it's I really agree with like the best way to learn is to make something with it because that is the way that you learn like what like it gets in your mind like oh if I want to do this I should call this like if I want to get distance I call vector3 dot distance if I want to determine if it's in front or behind I just do a dot product and like this is how I do that like you really learn what is required and what like programming it gets you into that mindset of programming which I think is the most important more
Hmm.
important than like knowing any specific language is like this is how I program. We have one final question from the audience for this panel. And from the Twitch chat, we have,
Ooh.
do indie projects matter on a resume? Should I build several smaller projects or focus on one larger project to showcase my skills? So this is kind of a double-pronged question.
At least on my end, I feel like it does matter in terms of like if you are getting different skills out of those projects that you can showcase in the resume, then perfect. I feel like all these different projects you're creating and classes, just personal projects, they can be on your resume. I think that kind of just goes into how are you like just kind of strategies for like resume and portfolio building, where like if it's a lot of redundant information, sometimes it's like okay to cut that and then also just maybe like have extra things in your portfolio to like show you've done these projects. But I feel like I think both ways can totally be good, just as long as you can communicate the different skills you're learning from those projects. Yeah.
Yes, anything can be on your resume as far as games you've made goes. Um, if by indie games you mean like a personal project that you've finished to completion, yes, absolutely put that on your resume. That is a really great indicator of your progress because you almost certainly learned a lot from that project, both in what you made and also your process of doing it and what you would do differently next time. And then as far as student projects go, especially like capstone projects, those are also excellent resume candidates because, that was a very closely monitored effort of building out a game. And this might depend on where you did it, but you might have also worked with industry mentors in that process and learned things from them. So those are great learning experiences that definitely belong on a resume. And if you have multiple projects and you're not sure like which ones would be best for your resume, I would definitely say it's good to have, like Nathan mentioned, a good variety of things that you're showcasing. Like if on one project you did a lot of gameplay programming and on another one you did network programming, definitely show both of those because that's showing that you have a very broad range of engineering experience that you're showing off. So definitely, like if you have a good variety of projects, it's definitely good to put a few of those on your resume.
And just a quick note too is like if you can't put it on the resume, if you have a portfolio that you're putting things as well, it's also useful to be writing out like or showing your process and maybe writing out those lessons that you learned. It can be like a good discussion point too, or just showing people you know how to critically think about the work that you've been doing as well.
Yes, absolutely make a portfolio website. It's something I still need to do, and I wish I had done earlier.
feel like devlogs are also really helpful for this, of just like talk about your
100%.
experience, or put it on your itch. Those itch has literally a thing for devlogs. And
Yes.
you're probably going to be uploading your games to itch because it's one of the better portfolio websites if you don't have one. And
Yeah.
I'm very lucky
Mhm.
that I kind of just put one together in high school by definitely yoinking my friend's code and just being like, all right, let's see how this works. Um, but portfolios are so important.
Hmm.
Especially this is a creative industry. It's the best way to showcase what you do and what you can do.
Mhm.
Um, I think with that, we're just about at time. Thank you to both of our guests for coming and speaking with us today. This was really valuable. I learned a lot about just how this works. I'm going to be applying this when I go into
Yeah.
the industry as well. Um,
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
of
thank you so
course.
much.
After this, we'll be having a little bit of a break, and then we'll be starting with our second or our third student showcase slot at around 12:30. We will see everybody there. Thank you so much once again.
Bye bye.
See ya.